what she did.
We'll start a recording here. Vamos a grabar y buenas tardes a todos y buenas tardes a todas. Espero que ustedes estén bien. I hope you guys are all well. Hoy vamos a practicar con muchísimas cosas, pero como siempre, as almost always, we'll start off. Even though most of our practice tonight is going to be all things subjunctive, which is always a bugaboo for people who are English speakers firsthand. If you are fortunate to be in the boat of, I didn't speak English first, I spoke French, Portuguese, I don't know, name a bunch of other languages, then you might not find subjunctive as scary and awful, because many other languages do have it. We are the oddballs, you could say, in the group. But before starting our subjunctive, I want to see, vamos a ver. I do want to see, and I'll show his picture so that you can, yeah. Ay, pregunta, ¿hay alguna pregunta? Is there any kind of question on what you listened to after the doggy backpack, which was around minute 6? Any question on any terms he used? I did give you a set of terms because he uses a very limited amount of slang.
Well, having this list was very helpful, I want to say. Yes.
Okay. Bien.
Gracias.
Un pregunta. La blonde fue la cerveza. Aquí?
Sí, la rubia, sí. El misterio de quién, con quién tiene una cita, una rubia. ¿Con quién tiene una? No es con quién, sino con qué. What does he have a date with? Well, the blonde was a blonde beer, was a light-colored ale beer. Yeah, sí.
Okay.
Para que sepan, just so you guys know, that thing of calling it Estrella, that is a brand name. It is a famous beer in Spain. As a matter of fact, just like, I don't know, what brands,
Bud.
Yeah, Sam Adams or Bush or Budweiser, or the many brands of ales and beers. Just as people have promotional things in commercials or buried in movies, Estrella gets promotional things buried in little movies and little videos. And everybody goes, oh, yeah. It's like seeing, Bud or, whatever beer, because I'm not a big beer aficionado to know a lot of brands, but you know what I mean. It's like seeing that in American TV. So Juan is a very big fan of everything being very tongue-in-cheek. So his nod to the tongue-in-cheek was that the blonde was a light ale.
He did refer to his date as being with a chica.
Sí.
And that's kind of cheating there.
La cerveza?
La cerveza.
It's not a chica.
Yeah, we can play loosey-goosey with the gender thing there even, yeah. See. Okay, any other terms? That didn't make sense or that you didn't quite get?
There was the one that I asked you about, fijaos.
Otra vez, Karen,
turned out to be a command.
Fijaos, fijaos, okay. So one thing you got to watch out, and there'll always be a different little twist depending on the country the person is from, the person who does the video. The little twist with him, and it will be different than the twist you're going to have this week. The twist with him, I'm going to show you what Karen is asking about. And actually, this is a very good question. Actually, it is a deeper question than I had originally anticipated. And I'll show you why, because it's an odd question. Fijaos. What the heck is that? Well, it comes from this. Fijarse. Because he is a red-blooded Spaniard, they do use vosotros. And to talk to you guys, he uses the familiar you guys. So whereas anybody from Latin America would be using the ustedes as you guys, he uses vosotros as you guys, because that's what Spaniards do. They get on a familiar level very quickly. So he treats his audience as buds. And therefore, you know, it's vosotros, you guys. He assumes more than one person is watching. He's got a big following. Fijaos is a command. It comes from fijarse. Fijarse es literally to latch your eyeballs onto something, to notice, to pay attention, I guess you could say. Okay. And it literally means fix your eyes on this thing and yeah, glue them on. But literally the vosotros command would be fijad. And because it's a command, we attach this, but when we attach that os, that funny, the substitute for se, because it's the familiar, that D goes away, fijaos. And even if it didn't go away, Spaniards from the southern part of Spain, as he is, typically drop their D's. Drop their D's, act as if they're not there. So that's just a little command. It says, hey, heads up. Heads up. That's what fijaos means.
Not on mute.
Yeah. Okay. ¿Qué más? Any other questions from his video that was like, did not know what he meant? Or no? No. Ok. Bien. Vale. Bueno. Vamos a practicar entonces con el subjuntivo y voy a engrandecer mis apuntes. If you happened to print something out, or if you want to pull the electronic file up at the same time, lo que sea, whatever it might be, this is the information that we're working with tonight. And this is kind of a new addition because somebody had a question about this in the morning session. So we'll come back to this dudo que thing in a minute. So this file, which was called class notes, which was from last week, lists the important ideas with subjunctive that we will be actively using today. Okay, so if you need to pull that up for whatever reason, feel free to start hunting for that now. I am going to preview this with a couple of quick kind of steps back. Forming subjunctive in general is not hard in terms of the whole thing of, oh, I've got to learn a whole new conjugation. There are only two things you really need to keep in mind for the vast majority of these subjunctive forms. Thing number one is that if you always start with the yo form of the presente, yeah, if you start with the yo form in present tense of any verb, you're able to use that yo form to get to the subjunctive. Okay, numero uno. And it's very important to start with the yo form. If you don't do that, you're going to step in a big pothole and twist your ankle immediately. So always start with yo and get rid of the o. And what do you do after that? You just add on the opposite, what sounds like the wrong vowel. So AR verbs will take ER-IR endings, and ER-IR verbs are going to take AR endings. So in essence, it sounds like you are conjugating something wrong. But in fact, if somebody uses the opposite vowel type ending, they are using subjunctive with you. That's what they're doing. That's how we form the subjunctive. So how to form, and we'll talk a little bit later and next week more about where the irregulars fit into this, because there are irregulars, okay? But they're technically a very small category. Okay, so formation of the subjunctive means, because we start with yo, things like stem changes happen, okay? They will be there in the subjunctive. And all those funny verbs that have the yo go forms, like salgo, vengo, yeah, digo, all of those are in play because those yo forms that get the go kind of endings, that go shows up again in subjunctive, except it just uses an opposite vowel, right? Because we start with the yo, we drop the o, we add the opposite vowel. So all those things that you think of as odd or irregular, like salgo, vengo, digo, those are actually going to be used as the base form to turn a verb into a subjunctive form. So formation of subjunctive, really not that hard. It just does the flip-flop of what you expect using present tense. Okay, but why we use it, that's the stinker. That's the hard part for the English speaker. English has technically a subjunctive, but English, instead of really using subjunctive the way French or Spanish or a bunch of other languages do, English uses like 4 or 5 different things. And it's different all the time, depending on the situation. It's like almost never the exact same. So we haven't got a nice, comfortable, corresponding structure that is consistent in English. And that is what makes subjunctive hard for us. Boom. Okay. Because when I tell you that subjunctive is used to say that the action is not part of reality, huh? What the heck does that mean? Well, what that means is that subjunctive is used to indicate that the action you're talking about is not really happening in real time. It is something that could happen, might happen, may happen. In English, we even use an infinitive in that, to express the same idea. So, yeah, that's why it's sketchy and weird and difficult to figure out. Okay. Bien. So, what we're going to try to get over and practice to get over us over that hump is that instead of going through lots of rules, we're going to give you one rule. And that one rule is that subjunctive is used to indicate that the action of the verb is not a part of what's really going on, like presente, present tense, like pretérito or imperfecto for the past tenses. It is talking about something that maybe you want to happen or maybe you think is possible to happen, but it isn't really happening yet. All right. So, yeah. Instead of getting lots and lots of rules, we had a video where a guy said, get used to these trigger ideas and don't try to do them all at once, because if you try to do them all at once, it becomes extremely intimidating and it becomes a memorization exercise. That is difficult. What we want to get used to is that this snippet of words, and I'm going to throw in the dudoke into it because this came up in the morning and I said, okay, we'll throw that in. What we want to get used to is that when you hear these kinds of phrases, that means red flag up, subjunctive is coming soon, because these phrases indicate something that is uncertain to actually happen, or it is flat out contrary to the facts of the matter. Okay? And don't overthink that, because if you try to approach this mathematically, as in two negatives make a positive. If you try to approach it mathematically, logic is going to fail you. This is language, not mathematics. Okay. Just know that when we've got these kinds of phrases for now, they are going to indicate a subjunctive. So the no creo que means I don't think that, and that means you don't believe that whatever is coming afterwards is really a thing. Okay, and when I say don't overthink that, I can say I don't think there's a Santa Claus, right? Or I do think that, let's put it more in more likely way. I do, I don't think it's true when you tell me there's no Santa Claus. Whether or not that's really that, no, it's what I don't think. No creo que. Whether or not no creo que is followed by something that is really reality or not, it's how I view it. And how I view it is no creo que. I don't think that. Okay? So you have to take it on faith. No creo que brings up doubt. Boom, over. It's going to need a subjunctive. And I'm adding this in because the morning people pointed this out. Somebody said, what about that doubt, duda, or that verb, duda, I doubt? That falls in the same category as no creo que. Dudo que, I doubt that. It requires subjunctive. Okay. So these two fall in that same category of talking about things that don't exist or that I don't really think are a part of reality, and they will need subjunctive. And these others are kind of other reasons, but just know that if you hear them, it's the red flag. Here comes subjunctive. You need to use it. Yeah? Okay.
Yes, Marilyn, question? It is espero que also always followed by a subjunctive?
Okay is another kind of trigger. It was one not brought up in that video, but espero que, which means I hope that, is another trigger. Quiero que is another trigger. See, there are a bunch. There are a bunch.
Gracias.
If we practice the whole wad of it, it becomes like a great big ball of yarn you just gave to your cat to play with. And it's hard to memorize. So that's how we're going to vamos a enfocarnos en estos ejemplos. We're going to focus on these examples, but there are a lot of others. So it's going to be a bit by bit, a piece by piece insertion of new things. But we want to get really, really super comfortable with these 6 or 7 ideas that were first introduced. So our objective is going to be to hear lots of examples with these so that it becomes an automatic red flag recognition. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, these are not the only ones. Vale. Bueno, okay. So, we use opposite vowels. So instead of llega, we get a llegue. Instead of estudias, we get a tu form, which becomes opposite vowel, estudies. Instead of entendemos, we get something with an amos instead of an hemos, entendamos. Yeah? Instead of como, for I'm eating, we put it in the realm of, well, I may eat or I might eat, and it becomes coma. Yeah? Okay. The one kind of nice thing is that you have one less conjugation than the usual, because the yo form and the el a usted form. So if you're a grammar type person, that means first person singular, yo, and third person singular, el a usted. They use the same exact form. Yay. Okay. So they use the same kind of conjugation. There are a few oddballs which you may want to use, and you'll look more next week at, and we'll practice more next week what the oddballs are. Okay, so just know these are some of the oddballs that I threw in because they're oddballs that we happen to use a lot, right? So I is a verb we use a lot. If you want to say there might be, it's haya. And again, I comes from haber, an ER verb, so it still uses an a ending. The ER verb, haber, uses an a ending, okay? Haya. Tener is an ER verb, but it'll start with yo tengo, drop the o on tengo, and use the opposite vowel, tenga. So all the forms, conjugations of tener in subjunctive are tenga, tengas, again, repeated, tenga, tengamos, tengáis if you're in Spain, but we don't need to work with that, so we're not going to look at vosotros, and tengan, right? Same with venir. Venir starts with vengo. Vengo is the yo form. We ditch the o off the end of vengo, and we get to venga, vengas, venga, vengamos, vengan. That's what we have. Ser is a true oddball. You'll get a video of this coming week on, it's one of the true irregulars, falls into that category. Wow. If I start with soy, the yo form, soy, it doesn't end in O. Uh-oh. I can't follow the drop the O and flip the vowels, but I do flip the vowels. So yeah, sea is the base form here for ser, and vaya is the base form for ir. It uses an a ending, even though ir is an IR verb. But again, I can't start with boy because boy doesn't end in an o. I got no o to drop. So these are the oddballs that you might want to use, you might have chosen to use somewhere in your examples today. Just know for right now, I wanted to give you those base forms. Bien. Okay. And I forgot, forgot to get changes into, forgot to change me these. So now we've got, unfortunately, answers showing, well, pues así es. A ver. Here's what we come up with. Yeah, if you've got entender, you can see that we have to start with entiendo, drop the o off of entiendo. Creo, and we get to, we move it from entender into as. But it's got a stem change, so that stem change stays there, right? So it's entiendas. Okay, and since I forgot to take these out, we looked at the answers in the morning class. Here they are. No creo que tú entiendas means I don't think you understand. I don't believe that. I don't think that you understand. Now, you could say, please don't apply in the Spanish sense of logic, don't apply the logic of, well, I don't think you understand, but maybe you do. Don't ask too many questions. If you're saying, I don't think that, it's got to have subjunctive in Spanish. No creo que tú entiendas. And in point of fact, people will take out the tú in most, the tú is there for you to just know that is the prompt. That's the form I want, the tú form. No creo que entiendas. That's how you'll hear it. People will drop the tú. The tú was there to give you a prompt. No creo que entiendas. I don't think you understand. Now look at what happens in English. I don't think you understand. We just use plain old present tense. You might say in English, I don't think that you may understand what's happening. We might insert the idea of may, and that starts to come close to the idea of subjunctive, okay? No creo que haya comida. From that, going from hay to the subjunctive, it becomes haya. No creo que haya comida. The verb that really comes from at its core is haber. Haber is where I comes from. Haber is what I comes from. And the subjunctive form of haber uses an a ending, even though it's an er verb, okay? This is one of the oddball ones. I don't think that there's food. let's say, in the fridge, ¿sí? En el refrigerador, en la nevera. No creo que haya comida en la nevera. I don't think that there's food. Es importante que ustedes ayuden. It's important that you guys help out. Yeah. Pitch in, help out. This comes from ayudar, right? And ayudar starts with ayudo. It drops the O. It flips out to what you think is wrong. For an AR verb, it gets A. Es importante que ustedes ayuden. It's important that you guys help out. We're going to come back to this idea. Oh, you know what? Sometimes you will legitimately, correctly hear people say, es importante ayudar. It's important
To help.
to help. That is correct. But if I express this idea as es importante ayudar, have I named who I want to do the helping?
No.
No,
No.
no, just general statement.
Exacto. Yeah, it's kind of implied, but not really named. So notice, you know, this idea of es importante ayudar is something that you've probably heard something like that frequently in beginner Spanish. And that's perfectly legitimate and good, but we're not naming who it is that's going to be doing the help. And when we don't name a person, when we don't name an extra human being, and when I don't have this little really important word, okay, I am likely to flip back into the infinitive. These es with a description thing, they are called impersonal phrases. And para que sepan, just so you guys know, these es importante, these kinds of concepts, these kinds of phrases, they are legion. There are many of them. I could trade out es importante for es necesario, and I would still need subjunctive. I could trade out es importante for es posible. Es posible que ustedes ayuden, and I would still need subjunctive. There are many, many what they call impersonal phrases that start off with es and then a little description word. And many of those will use subjunctive, many of them. So just know that that is coming in. Okay, if we are starting out with the idea of explicar. Es importante que tú me expliques. Right? We won't phrase this as es importante que tú me explicas. It'll be tú me expliques. And again, likely somebody's going to drop that tú word entirely, right? Because the verb explains it all. How come we got this funny spelling thing? We got that funny spelling thing because
Save the hard C.
Kargarzar verbs are a thing, and their thing for Kargarzar verbs that end in CAR or ZAR or GAR is that there's going to be a little spelling tweak, and it's really minor. And I will tell you that when people think opposite vowel, they always pronounce this as expliques, but you need to know that if you saw it in writing, it could not be written like this. So I gotta think really hard to spell it this way. Explicar. I cannot just say, oh, look, opposite vowel, and do this with a car verb, because expliques. Expliques. If I looked at the spelling of this and just kept the C, but put in an ES, remember CE in Spanish sounds like se. So this, if I spelled it this way, would be explices. Explices. And explices, no, we want the ending to sound like a k ending. Yeah. And because CE in Spanish goes into a different pronunciation for that letter C, we have to do a tweak. And the spelling tweak is this. The ES is there, and that's all good. Yeah. But I also need to spell it with a QU to get to the k sound. That's all it is. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, explicit, that's not even a thing. That doesn't even exist. That can't exist.
Excuse me, Marilyn.
Easy.
Do all the cars turn into queues?
All the
then?
cars do that.
Okay.
All the cars do that. All the gars do that, but with a different spelling, with that spelling, GU. Yeah. And all the zars do that. So verbs like, oh, I'll show you. Yeah. With ZAR, it becomes a CE thing. Okay. So car, verbs like buscar, explicar. Yeah. Gar verbs, like navegar, like, yeah, anything that ends in gar, right? Like negar. All the zar verbs like empezar, comenzar, that's maybe a smaller category. Yeah. So just know it's only a spelling change. You pronounce it like you will expect when people pronounce it, they never get it wrong. It's a spelling thing. Okay, let's take a look at ojalá que. And ojalá que is great because it just means hopefully, and you get the idea from hopefully that, ooh, whatever comes up next is a maybe. Yeah. And if we got a maybe, it does not exist in the world of real-time event. Okay. Ojalá que los clientes tengan suficiente dinero. Yeah. That we start with tengo. That's the yo form. We drop the o, and tener is an ER verb, so it's going to get an a type ending, right? And clientes needs a plural ending, so it's tengan, not just tenga. Ojalá que los clientes tengan suficiente dinero. Hopefully the customers have enough money. And you see in English, we're likely to say that as hopefully the customers have enough money. You are probably less likely as an English speaker to say, hopefully the customers may have enough money. But that may have is kind of implied, even though we might not say it as may have. Yeah. And ojalá que mi amigo me llame. Hopefully my friend calls me, and that comes from llamar, right? I start with llamo, I drop the o, I go to the opposite vowel. It's an AR verb. It becomes llame, llame. So these kind of endings here, which are the subjunctive answers that we get to here, make really, really sure, especially with something like llame, make sure that in your English pronunciation, you vanquish, get rid of, completely obliterate that English habit of using the sound means a schwa ending, and English native speakers love the sound If you pronounce this llame as llama, person who's listening to you is going to be a little bit puzzled. What did that person mean? Right? We have to make sure we get that ending of llame distinguished from llama. Okay, and it's not good enough to say that speaking as the sound It will confuse people. All right. It's super, super important to get the vowels flat out, straight out, right, nail it, right? Things are going to have either an kind of ending or an kind of ending, and it has to sound exactly like that vowel sound. So get rid of that schwa. It is your enemy for being understood. Okay? Okay. Now, here I remembered to revert everything. Back to the original. Yay. Bien. So let's see if we can, you guys can plug these in. No puedes tomar cerveza a menos que
Tu comas.
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 A menos que comas algo con la bebida. You're warning somebody to not get schnockered drunk. Yeah. What's our trigger? A menos que. Unless. No puedes tomar cerveza. You can't have beer. A menos que comas algo con la bebida. You can't be drinking down the beer unless you're putting food in your stomach too, unless you're eating. Unless you're eating. A menos que comas. I see that my good buddy is not eating anything, but they're guzzling down this stuff. Uh-oh. So this thing of eating is not happening. And I'm warning the person, hey, you can't be doing your cerveza. No puedes tomar cerveza a menos que, unless you start doing this. This means the eating is not happening. And I am warning you and shaking my finger. A menos que comas algo. And English doesn't have a subjunctive to say that. We just say you can't drink beer unless you eat. And literally in Spanish is what you're saying, unless you might also eat with that. But English speakers are unlikely to include the idea of might or may. Okay. No voy a entender el video a menos que, what happens with leer?
Leah.
Yeah.
Lea.
Leah.
And you got to make sure, don't fall into the pothole, the trap of the schwa sound. Lea. Ah. Has to be a yeah. Lea. We start with leo, right? To get to that lea form, we get rid of the o. Leer is an ER verb. We pop in the opposite vowel, which is lea. Bien? I'm not going to understand the video unless I
Read.
read the subtitles. And right now, I'm not reading the subtitles. It's unless I read, so I better start doing this. Yeah, this is telling you, the a menos que tells you that action of reading the subtitles isn't really happening yet. I need to start doing that. Yeah, see, a menos que. Do know that a menos que is flexible in terms of word order. So I could take this whole thing and lead off the sentence with that. And it would sound like this. A menos que yo lea los subtítulos, no voy a entender el video. With this little phrase, a menos que, I can flip the order of the clauses. And it still means the same thing. But a menos que will need that subjunctive. A menos que. Okay, here comes another trinker. Antes de que. No puedo salir antes de que nosotros limpiamos la cocina. I can't. And it's not limpiamos, it's
Limpiemos.
limpiemos, right. So we need to tweak and change that limpiamos idea, that limpiar into limpiemos. No puedo salir, I can't get out of here. No puedo salir antes de que nosotros limpiemos la cocina. So antes de que, before we clean, it means the cleaning has not yet happened, right? And that's why this limpiemos happens. Antes de que nosotros limpiemos la cocina. Okay, vale. And now we're going to use a different verb, venir, coming to a place. Yeah. I have to prepare the food before the guests
Antes de
are come on in.
vengas.
Venga.
Vengan.
Vengan.
Vengan. Yeah, it can't be vengas, right? An S would mean tú. Yeah, an S won't mean plural, an S will mean tú. So it's vengan because I've got more than one guest. Yeah.
Okay, but when you look at that and say, well, this is really a fact. You've got to make the food before the guests arrive.
It's just a person expressing it. No, do you have to make the food before your guests arrive? Maybe you
No.
don't. That's just the way the idea is expressed. See, don't try to make this mathematical logic, because it ain't that, honey. It ain't that, my friends. Yeah, it's not that. Yeah, you might say, well, yeah, it has nothing to do with, like, absolute philosophically based logic, right? The logic that you need is that this is a red flag word, a phrase, red flag.
Because here we've got a word chunk, tango K, as opposed to just tango. And so
It's-
now we're saying the tango K means not only you have to, but it means, and then you have to go to subjunctive.
No.
It's kind of like that K is doing double duty.
Tengo que preparar is just I have to fix something. It's just expressing. Tengo que preparar just means I have an obligation to do this, right? Tengo que means obligation. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And tengo que preparar does not use subjunctive. No, ever, right? Antes de que is a red flag. It says, watch out, this next thing is not yet happening. I do not yet have people knocking on my door. Yeah. And notice that quite often we invert the verb and the subject with this after this antes de que. I can't tell you why that happens. It just does. So it usually won't be phrased as antes de que los invitados vengan. That would be okay, but it's usually phrased this way. Antes de que vengan los invitados. It just goes in that order, okay? And know that I could take this phrase and I could lead off the same sentence, but starting with antes de que. So it could sound like, antes de que vengan los invitados,
Tengo que.
coma, tengo que preparar la comida. Yeah, I could invert the order of those two clauses and it would still be a-okay. Todo bien, all good. Todo bien. Okay. So, antes de que is a great big red flag. Antes de que. But notice it's got to be antes de que. It's got to use that que word. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. It's got to be antes de que. Have you ever heard somebody use just by itself? Antes de and no word que?
Before. Yes.
You may.
Infinitive.
And I'll show you how to watch out for that. Okay. That antes de que has got to have the que. But notice what happens here. Yo in the first half is who I'm talking about. No puedo salir. Yo is the person who can't leave, right? And notice what happens after this antes de que. I've got a different human being in the other half of this. Yo up front, nosotros back here. That is a frequent element, right?
Mm.
Let's look at our example here. Yo up here with tengo que preparar, even though I don't say yo. Yo is who's got the obligation to get all the food ready, right? Tengo que preparar is talking about yo doing that action. And antes de que, now I got a different human being I'm talking about doing that action of venir. This is an element that frequently has to happen. And we'll show you when that doesn't happen, what do we do? Okay. Let's look at one last red flag warning. Yeah. Escribe mi número de teléfono para que, what do I do with poder?
Puedas.
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 With us.
You know,
Okay.
you're hearing puedes, right? Puedes, that is the indicativo. But when I've got a para que, it's red flag, watch out. I need subjuntivo. Puedas. Yeah, I start with puedo, the yo form. And because poder is an ER verb, I get an as ending here. Escribe mi número de teléfono para que puedas recordarlo. ¿Qué quiere decir? What the heck does that mean? And people will drop the tu, by the way. That's just your prompt. What does that mean?
Write your telephone number so that I can remember it.
I'm writing my phone number so that you can remember it. So that you can remember it. You don't have to remember it yet, but that's so you can later on when you walk away and you know you're not a Mensa person who automatically memorizes all kinds of numbers. Yeah. Okay. Para que is a great big red flag warning, so get used to that. Para que. We're going to do some of relajarse. Limpiamos el patio. We're cleaning up the patio. Para que, so that. And this todos just means everybody.
Say,
Relajete.
Yeah, I've got to do some with relajarse. And it's a reflexive. So I take off the se, right?
Put in the front.
I got to move it up front. Bien. And now I do something with relajar.
Relajen.
Relajen.
Relajen. Okay. It becomes this. Limpiamos el patio para que todos se relajen en el jardín. We're cleaning up the patio so that everybody, they can all relax, chill out. Yeah, kick up their heels in el jardín, in the yard, in the garden, however.
Yeah,
you-
Marilyn, with that one, I didn't know if it would be nos relajamos is, yeah, so that we could, but I don't know.
Es buen punto. That is an interesting point, Anita, because sometimes todos can be interpreted as all of us.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought the same thing, Jen.
I didn't.
I'm going to show you soon why it is not that, but in this, yeah, todos can be interpreted as an ellos verb, right? It can also be interpreted as a nosotros prompt. It can be. That's not out of the question, but here it's meant as a third person, a plural, something where I'm just talking about a big group of people. Yeah. Kind of similar to this idea, invitados. Yeah. Kind of similar, but todos is more general. Yeah. So they can all relax. Yeah. Okay. But you're right. Sometimes people will use todos and they'll mean all of us. Todos nosotros formally. So es posible, it's possible. Okay. Vale, bien. Did most of that make sense? Or did we have any blips?
One question. The very first example, no puedes tomar cerveza a menos que tú comas algo con la bebida. You don't actually have two different subjects there. You have the same two in both clauses.
Ah,
It's a
yes. But the a menos que,
The a menos que
yes.
trumps it, huh? Okay.
In general, most of the time, you need to have two different subjects for most triggers. But this a menos que, that a menos que just needs subjunctive because it means unless. And unless means that action coming after that we're talking about afterwards isn't really happening yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So usually we do need to have two different people in those two different clauses. Yeah. That's a good observation. But with that phrase, a menos que, well, unless is going to take a kind of a different tack on that. Yeah, it's because of the definition of this term. Unless means that activity isn't really happening at this time. So, a menos que 100% of the time takes subjunctive. It just does. Yeah, es buena pregunta. That's a good question. Okay. Bien, bien. How about some original ideas? What kind of ideas? Whoops. What kind of ideas, original ideas, did you come up with for these kind of triggers? Who's got a good?
Oh, I have one.
Karen, give us one.
No creo que el monzón comience esta semana.
No creo que el monzón comience esta semana. I don't think that monsoon is starting. Okay. Perfecto. No creo que el monzón, that means monsoon, comience. Comience or empiece. Same idea, different verb, same thing. And here's a ZAR verb, comenzar. It won't be ZE, it'll be a CE. There's a funny rule in Spanish. You cannot have Z and E next to each other. Why is that? I don't know. It just is. So, yeah. But notice, even if you don't spell it right, you say it right. Comience. Perfecto. Okay. Otra idea. Otro ejemplo. Another example.
I have one. Antes de que yo salga a Seattle, yo necesito hacer la maleta.
Antes de que salga a Seattle.
Yo necesito, and I looked up to pack a suitcase and they said, hacer la maleta.
Hacer la maleta. Necesito hacer la maleta.
So they don't have a pack a suitcase?
Yeah, well, you know, hacer la maleta is very accepted and very commonly used. There is some regions in some areas where they speak Spanish, they do use empacar.
Oh yes, I knew I had
That
heard
is
of the word, but it didn't
That
come
is-
up what I was looking for.
Yeah, it sounds like pack. Yeah, empacar. Oh, look, it's a car verb. Yeah. And some regions may favor that term rather than hacer la maleta, but hacer la maleta is very, very widely used for you make your suitcase.
Yeah.
Or you do your suitcase.
You do your suitcase, yeah. Kind of like doing your laundry, yeah. Okay. Bien. Otro ejemplo.
So, Marilyn, I got tripped up on, you know, you use hace in terms of hace frío, hace calor, hace that sort of thing. And what I wanted to say was, no creo que Alaska haga calor. But then I really second guessed myself and I said,
Oh, no
well,
creo que haga calor. I don't think it's going to get hot.
right.
Correcto. No creo que haga calor.
So,
Perfecto.
oh, let's record that for a moment.
No, no creo que haga calor. I don't think it's going to be hot.
Okay.
No creo que haga calor. I don't think it's going to be a steamer. Eso es.
Where I got tripped up is when you're talking about cold or hot or whatever, you're using the hace frío, hace calor, hace that sort of thing. And
To
I
talk
thought,
about weather.
yeah, so it's like, have I covered that? Have I covered that rule?
Yeah, sí. Hace calor. When we talk about weather, that is the verb that they use because the weather makes heat, it makes sun, there are a few verbs that are used with weather. Hacer is one. Estar is sometimes used. So por ejemplo, no creo que esté nublado. I don't think that it's cloudy. Esté nublado, estar is used with weather phrases also. I is also used with, the big three verbs that are often used with weather are I, or estar, or hacer. Those are three super common verbs to be used with different kinds of weather expressions.
Oh, okay.
Bien. Sí,
Got it.
if you want to talk about weather. Eso es. Now, I'm going to come back to this briefly. Because you're using yo in both of these, actually, there's something more common that's going to happen here. And this goes back to the thing that Karen brought up of, well, wait a minute, I don't have two. Well, with a menos que, I don't have a choice. But with this thing of before I'm going to do this, is usually going to take this form. And we're going to see this later. Antes de salir, and notice no word que. Antes de salir a Seattle or para Seattle, you can use it either way, necesito hacer la maleta. This is really a more frequent way to say this. If I'm not going into two different subjects, generally, I'm going to keep it. This is the more favored form.
Okay, no K.
Okay. Antes de que is usually going to use subjunctive, but if I don't change, if it's yo up here and yo still here, it's usually going to wind up being this. And we're going to look at why that happens in a different slide. Okay, so we'll come back to that now. Okay. A ver. Any other example?
Pregunta,
Sí,
una
dime.
pregunta. So I wanted to say, which goes along with what you're saying, a menos que nosotros limpiemos la piscina, no podemos nadar. So I'm using we for both. If we don't clean the pool, we
A
can't
menos
swim.
que is one of those things. It is going to be, yeah, it cannot take an infinitive. A menos que is the whole phrase.
So you can then, they're using we and we for both parts of the
Yeah,
phrase.
and that works. A menos
Okay.
que limpiemos
Okay.
la piscina unless we clean the pool. ¿Cuál es la otra parte, Susana?
No podemos nadar.
No podemos nadar. Yeah, sí.
If you say amenos without the K, are you saying
You
At
won't
least.
hear, you
you're
won't
saying
hear
at least
amenos
instead of
without the K.
unless?
You
I think
won't
it
hear-
changes the meaning.
You won't hear amenos without K.
Well, how would you say least? Or less than?
Menos.
Just
Menos.
menos, just
Just
menos.
menos, not a menos. Okay.
¿Sí? Por ejemplo, como menos que mi hijo. I eat less than my
Child.
Yeah, I eat less than my son. Como menos que mi hijo. But it's not a menos que. A menos que is a chunk of words that hangs together. And that specific chunk of words doesn't mean less, it means unless.
No, I just thought without the K that it might mean.
It's always heard as a menos que. Yeah, it's got to hang together as that specific chunk. Yeah, it's got to be that way. Okay. Otros ejemplos. Other examples.
Ojalá que VA a las montañas este verano.
I'm missing your verb after ojalá que.
I'm doing viajar.
Okay,
VA.
viaje.
Viaje.
Viaje. Kind of hard to pronounce, isn't it? Yeah, viaje.
Viaje.
Viaje. It sounds just like the noun viaje, but here it's acting as a verb. Ojalá que viaje a las montañas
Este verano.
este verano. Sí. Perfecto. Ojalá que. Ojalá que is a tried and true fave, because you don't really need to alter anything with ojalá que, and you know it has to take subjunctive. Always, all the time. Ojalá que viaje a las montañas este verano. Ojalá que yo viaje, if you want to be more specific, yeah. You might include the yo, because I could also say, ojalá que mi familia viaje a las montañas este verano, right? I could plug something else in with viaje, but perfecto. Perfect. Okay. Bueno.
One more question. Okay. I have necesitamos reparar el techo antes de que llueva mucho. But it seems to me, do you really want to say antes de que? Maybe you just need antes de, because it's a fact. You know, if the roof is leaky, you need to fix it before it rains a lot.
Well, but it's not a fact because it hasn't rained yet.
Okay, so subjunctive is okay there.
Okay. Yeah. Give me the first half of that again, Karen.
Okay, necesitamos reparar el techo antes de que llueva mucho.
We need to fix the roof.
Before it rains a lot.
Sí, antes de que, sí, perfecto. Antes de que, and this is perfect, antes de que llueva mucho, before it rains a lot, or it rains at all, right? It doesn't matter if it rains a little, rains a lot, rains at all, okay? It's just llueva. And look what we've got. We need, and it rains, because I don't rain and you don't rain. It
Mhm.
rains. And that only gets conjugated one way because we don't rain and I don't rain. Yeah. Antes de que llueva mucho. Necesitamos reparar el techo antes de que llueva. Before it rains. And before it rains is the thing that people say a lot, right? We always have something we got to do before it rains. Yeah. Tenemos que mover los muebles en el patio. We've got to move the patio furniture antes de que llueva. ¿Sí? Tengo que barrer antes de que llueva. I've got to sweep before it rains and creates a great big muddy mess. Yeah. Eso es, antes de que llueva. That is perfect. This is something that people say a ton. There are always a bunch of chores we've got to do before it starts to rain. Perfecto. Bien. Antes de que is always going to use a subjunctive. Here we go. Vale. Algo más. Something else as an example. You want to throw out there.
Well, one that I can't resist. This is my favorite song. Ojalá que llueva café en el campo.
Ojalá que llueva café. Sí, yeah, the famous song uses that. Ojalá que llueva. Hopefully it'll rain. See, but we might talk about a different weather condition. Ojalá que haga fresco. Hopefully it'll be cool. Ojalá que estemos a 80 grados. Hopefully we're at 80.
Okay.
We know that's not going to happen, but gee, we really would love it if it were, yeah?
Ojalá.
Okay, eso es. Any other examples? And notice, I told you to just pick up any two, because out of all these 6 triggers, just pick up the one that you're familiar with, or if you want to be hard on yourself, pick up 2 that are hard for you to remember and use those 2. See? Yeah. You're going to use these same ones next week. We're just going to use them in a different context with different ideas. Hay otro ejemplo. Any other?
I have ojalá que mi amigo me visite.
Perfecto. Ojalá que que mi amigo me visite. Perfecto. Hopefully my friend visits me. Okay. Now, let me posit a little scenario. Let's say, because this is esto es muy típico. Esto es muy típico, muy común. Let's say you're thinking on the fly, spur of the moment, and you're talking with somebody practicing, and let's say this comes out of your mouth as ojalá que mi amigo me visita. Is because you're so used to doing this. Yeah. Let's say your brain does a great big major brain fart, because we all do that sometimes. This is normal. Okay. Es normal. And let's say it comes out with that. Will somebody have no concept of what you're talking about if you make a boo-boo?
They should be able to guess.
I would think they would figure it
Absolutamente.
out.
Yeah. Is it an NBD? No big deal.
Yeah.
You might say that. Will somebody understand what you mean? Yes, they will understand what you mean. But will it come out as a big bleh? It is maybe a little bleh. Yeah. Does it sound funny to them? This sounds funny to them. Sounds funny. I'm going to say it might sound like this. Oh man, I ain't got no money.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean? Yes, you do.
Uneducated.
Right.
Yeah. Do you sound a little off? Yeah.
Rough.
Yeah. So yes, that will happen. So yeah, it should come out as visite, yeah. So that that sounds right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Bien. So let me go down to this one. I'm going to give you a big example. This is in bold because it is, this is something you hear people say all the time. So that almost, to be honest with you, you could just memorize these 3 words and you'd always be right.
para que sepas.
Para que sepas. This is something that comes out all the time. You'll hear people say it all the time. And here's what it means.
So you know.
So you know.
Just so you know. And why is that subjunctive? Because it's para que. But when I say just so you know, what's the assumption? You don't know yet.
You didn't know it, yeah.
You don't know.
Don't know.
Para que sepas, just so you know. Para que sepas, mi vecina está embarazada. Just so you know, my neighbor is preggy. Yeah, she's pregnant. Yeah. You know, people will get all kinds of chisme, gossip, or just flat out like not very juicy facts. Yeah. Para que sepas, conseguí 2 entradas al concierto. Just so you know, I got 2 tickets to the concert. Yeah, para que sepas, just so you know, because I'm assuming you don't know. So I'm going to give you I'm going to give you the dish, give you the new news on that. Para que sepa assumes that you don't know, and I am going to give you some nice little tidbit of information that you didn't know about yet. Yay. And para que sepas, you can just memorize that. But if I talk to a bunch of you, it has to become para que sepan. Just so you guys know, yeah? Sí. Bien. Okay, vale. We were only working with those triggers, and you're going to only work with those triggers with for this coming up week, so that you totally get comfortable with those triggers. Para que, antes de que, ojalá que. Most people get comfortable with ojalá que super fast. That is a normal thing, right? And what are my others? Because I am so used to the other one. Es importante que, and no creo que, no creo que. No creo que, I'm going to tell you guys, no creo que is the one that actually, this one is kind of hard for the way our English brains reason. No creo que, just get comfortable with the fact of, if I don't think that, it means I've got to use subjunctive. It's talking about something that doesn't exist. And whether I am correct when I say I don't think that or not correct is kind of immaterial. It's immaterial. It's the fact that I don't think that. It's kind of like the toddler. I don't think that, and therefore it's true. Because it's what I think, and that's the way that works. Bien, okay. A ver. Let's take a look at some other examples that some other people thought of. Vale la pena. The more examples you hear, the better you get at it, right? Ojalá que yo vuele mañana. Hopefully, I fly out tomorrow. Oh, sin, que no haya cancelaciones, if there are no cancellations. Yeah, volar means to fly. Sí, ojalá que no haya cancelaciones. Hopefully there are no cancellations. Ideas like that. Es importante que no se duche después de tomar. Oh, somebody's talking about having a couple of drinks too many and then getting in the shower and doing a whoop and falling in the shower. That was an idea that somebody came up with. It was kind of funny. Ojalá que los estudiantes comprendan la tarea de español. Sí. But notice what happens when I don't have que. So now we're going to go into. Yeah, we're going to come back to this necesito one later. Mis padres me necesitan dar más dinero para que yo compre un carro nuevo. My parents need to give me more money so that I can buy a new car, what every 16-year-old says. Yeah, mis padres me necesitan dar más dinero para que yo compre un carro nuevo. And notice, my parents need to cough up the money. We're talking about mis padres in the first clause, the first half of a sentence. and we switch it to what I want to do after that. And this para qué becomes important. No creo que, there's a baseball fan talking. No creo que los Dodgers sean mejores que los D-backs este año. No creo que los Dodgers sean mejores. I don't think that the Dodgers are better than the D-backs this year. You may say that's just their opinion, but you know what? When I am stating rules, no, I don't think that. And it means that I need to plug this ser verb instead of saying son mejores into sean mejores, right? No creo que ellos hablen francés. I don't think that they speak French. We're saying that I don't think that's a fact. So those are all examples. Let's come back to this for a quick minute, because I've got a bunch of things that we're going to play around with a little bit here, because something special might happen with para versus para qué, and a similar special thing may happen with antes de versus antes de que. So let's look at that. Necesito más dinero para comprar un carro nuevo. Here, because it's para instead of para qué, and because I've got yo in the first half, and I'm implying yo again in the second half, I don't need para qué anymore. I just need para. Okay, with para and with, we're going to take a look at this with antes de and with para. If I have no change in the subject of the sentence, if I keep the person I'm talking about all the same, antes de won't need subjunctive and para won't need subjunctive. They'll just use an infinitive. And you'll see how this is going to look different when you see the whole ball of wax here. So here it comes. Para and antes de have a different pattern when that little word que isn't used. When there isn't a change of subject, and by that I mean when we don't plug in a second, and let's even make this more specific, a second different person with the action, then just para plus infinitive is the right idea. And this para plus an infinitive is actually kind of an older and idea. It's an idea that you probably, when you hear it, you say, oh, I've heard things like that before a lot. So if you're only talking about one person and that one person doesn't change from the first part of the sentence to the second part, para plus infinitive works great. So it'll be this. Estudias para aprender español. You study in order to learn Spanish. And the implication is that you're also doing the learning. So if the you isn't changing from the estudias to the aprender phrase, if it's still tú in both of those realms, we don't really need the que. It's just para aprender. Estudias para aprender español. You study in order to learn Spanish, to learn it yourself. We're still talking about tú, right? But when I change it from tú estudias to ellos, and I make it somebody else in the second half, then I need it as para qué. When I'm talking about one person and a different human being in the other half, it can't just be para, it has to be para qué. Estudias español para que ellos te puedan entender. You study Spanish so that they can understand you. Yeah? That's where para qué comes in. if I don't have two different sets of people in the sentence, it's just para. And the same thing happens with antes de. Antes de is a preposition, just like para is a preposition. After a plain old preposition, we just put the infinitive. So antes de plus an infinitive, that's the usual pattern if you're only talking about the same human being throughout the whole sentence. So, corto las verduras antes de freírlas. I cut the veggies up before
Right.
frying them. And who's probably doing the frying?
Same person.
Same person, yeah?
Mhm.
Corto las verduras antes de freírlas. Antes de, without the little word que, means I'm only talking about the same person doing that, all those activities throughout. Corto las verduras antes de freírlas. But if I change it up from a yo doing this to a mamá doing something, with the second verb, now I need not antes de, but antes de que. Corto las verduras antes de que mamá venga a la cocina. I'm cutting the veggies up before mom
Comes into the kitchen.
comes into the kitchen. Yeah. So I've got yo, corto, 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 corto. I'm cutting up. And I'm really hoping that mom doesn't set foot in yet because I'm not done. Antes de que mamá venga, before mom comes in. Has she come in yet? No. Before she gets here. Antes de que mamá venga or venga mamá, right? They might switch the order of those verbs. That's what's going to happen. So do know that antes de is just the infinitive. Para, just the infinitive. But it's when we inject another human being, right, that we really need the antes de que, and we name the second different person. That's generally how that works out. Okay?
I have a question.
Sí, dime.
One of my sentences, I used antes de in the sentence. I don't know if this is right. Can I just read it real quick?
Sure, claro, sí.
Es importante que ejercites antes de duermas, or is it antes de dormir?
Oh, antes de dormir.
Okay.
Sí. Oh, you have three things strung together. See? Es importante que hagas ejercicio. Some ejercitar, some people do use exercise as a verb, I think especially just south of the border because the bleed over of English, into not really quite Spanglish, but hacer ejercicio is what is, I would say, more widely accepted.
Okay.
Yeah. Not to say you'll never hear that happen in certain regions, you may, but antes, sí, es importante que hagas ejercicio antes de dormir, before sleeping. Sí.
Marilyn,
Sí.
seems to me I remember you at one point in time saying, no creo que, you use subjunctive, but there was an exception when you drop the no.
Oh, and that isn't an exception. It is not an exception. Let me show you why.
So it's true.
Oh, you're making it true.
It's true.
Eso es. That's it. Okay. Let me add a little extra. Let me show you the difference. Voy a mostrarles voy a mostrarles lo que pasa aquí. I'm going to show you what happens here. No creo que No creo que exista Santa Claus. I don't think that. What comes out of many 10-year-old or 8-year-olds' mouths? No creo que exista Santa Claus, mamá. No no creo que exista Santa Claus. Papá Noel. However you call Santa Claus, okay? And I'm saying when I say I don't think, I am planting doubt in the second half of that sentence. But if I flip out that idea to creo que, I am saying, I think this is reality, man. Creo que existe Santa Claus. Says your 5-year-old. Creo que existe Santa Claus. Yeah. Creo que existe. I think he exists. Now, once in a while, I'm going to say this as a very, very, this is an example, almost like these words like tal vez or quizás, which both mean maybe.
Perhaps.
Maybe, perhaps is kind of in la la land. Sometimes you use subjunctive with it and sometimes not. And what that means is the person, by using subjunctive, is saying they're leaning towards the not, but they're not really sure. That's why in the video, the guy used tal vez, but I tell you, well, depende, it depends. That can do a flippy flop, yeah. Sometimes you may hear somebody with creo que existe, yeah, creo que no, okay. Creo que no exista Santa Claus. If somebody uses creo que with this, and they plug in a subjunctive, even though they use creo que, they're telling you, well, I think, but I am not like 100% on that. So you may hear somebody use that, but as a general rule, it is considered flat out right to do this. So here's what you should do. Don't make it into la la land iffy. Be firm. No creo que, subjunctive. I'm saying it does that. That condition in the second half doesn't exist. Creo que, firm. I think so. It must be true. Indicativo, plain old present tense indicative. The present tense you learned first days out in Spanish. Keep them separate. Just know if somebody uses creo que and they do plug in a subjunctive, it means, ooh, they have a seed of doubt you're sowing in. But as a general rule, people are going to use plain old present tense there. Bien?
No entiendo. So no creo is subjunctive and creo is.
No creo is subjunctive and creo que is indicative, what they call plain old pleasant present tense.
Oh.
No subjunctive needed there. Yeah, keep it that way. Once in a while, you'll hear people do a flippy flop on that, and that means in their gut, they're feeling uncertainty. But for your purposes, keep it separated. Keep it separated. No creo que, subjunctive, because we think it doesn't exist. Creo que, I'm saying it's a fact. Presente. Present tense. It exists. Okay? Bien?
Bien.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to have you do, and this may prompt a groan. Oh my God, this would prompt a groan. Look at that.
Oh.
Oh my God. You know what? I'm a fairly athletic person for my age, and I'm telling you right now, I would not even want to attempt to do that. I am going to be giving you a video, and actually, I would say this is where you're going to start it. This guy is going to sound very, very fast. This is from the Luisito series, and I know some of you, oh my God, Luisito, he talks so fast. He does talk very fast. No es Pablo, or no es Juan. He's not Juan. He talks way faster than Juan in his videos because he speaks to the native community. So here's what I'm going to tell you on this video. I want you to listen for the few times he does plug in a subjunctive. So you're going to need to do two things when you listen to this video. And I am also giving you vocabulary lists. So have that handy when you listen to this video. Here are the two things you need to do. You must to listen to Luisito. Click on the CC box and get those closed captions. You must. And also, even though I'm going to tell you, to my ear, he's talking kind of slowly in this one. To you, it will not feel this way. So you're going to do for thing number 2. Thing number 1, CC box. Thing number 2, click on this gear, which is the settings of YouTube, and look, playback speeds. You do not want normal for Luisito because he speaks quite quickly. You're going to click on speed and you're going to bump him down to 0.75, 3/4 of the way to normal speech, below normal speech. Do not plug it in below point. Don't think it'll be better if I put him at half speed.
Yes.
Because yeah, he'll sound like molasses coming out of a jar, or honey that got really hard and cold coming out of a jar. Okay, don't put it at 50. Also, do not expect to understand every single word he says, and you don't need to. Trust me, you don't need to. But what I do want you to notice is that we don't use subjunctive all the time, everywhere. We use it where we need it. And you're going to notice at least 3, maybe more, maybe 4 areas where he actually does plug in a subjunctive. And when he does that, he does it because either there's a trigger or there's a, this isn't a fact kind of thing happening. Okay. What you are going to get with this, though, is I am going to send a list of vocabulary words. Okay. Which are going to, and I'll show you what they're going to look like. Have those vocabulary words handy when you listen to the video, because he just hit 30 years old, and anybody 30 and younger is going to use these words if they're a native speaker. It is just what they do. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. I've got to pull up that file. ¿Dónde está? Momentito. The reason this video is funny is he talks about little old folks in China and what they typically do in a community setting in the parks in China. Luisito is so famous that when he walks down the street in like big cities in South America, he gets mobbed. He has to worry about, getting hunted down by fans. He's so well known. He travels all over the world and he talks about just interesting things in different places in the world. So here's your vocab cheat sheet. And on slide number 1, I am going to tell you, he's going to throw out some words that sound weird, because if you look them up in a dictionary, you might or might not find them because they're slang. So here are the slang terms, and these are slang that young people use. Cool. I know young people in Mexico, because that's from where Luisito's from, do use literally cool. Now, they have better words in Spanish instead of cool. Yeah, they've got chido, or, other words that mean, or padre, which mean cool, but they'll say cool. They just borrow that, but they say it with a Mexican Spanish accent. Cool, muy cool. Okay. You'll hear him say crack. Crack is a very popular word, not just in Mexico, but in Spain too. crack is something that young people use to say awesome. That's all you need to know. Crack, crack. But he won't pronounce it as crack. It'll be crack.
Crack.
Because makes only that sound, not crack, crack, crack. You're going to hear him toss out a no manches. That's a no way. No way. No way. And he's going to use something. I don't really know if this is technically Spanglish or not. A lot of folks in Mexico do use this. Instead of saying check it out, which really should be something else in proper Spanish, they use chequear. So chequen, but it sounds like check, doesn't it? Chequen means check it out. Meaning, hey, pay attention to this. Yeah. And brother is, yes, I know. It's the bro thing. Yeah. So those are all things that 20-somethings will use. But beyond that, you're going to have lots of other little words. They're going to be vocabulary words. I don't want you to look all this stuff up because it'll be a challenge for you, but a good challenge to listen to him at 75% speed. It'll be a good thing. And you'll know what he's talking about, like really 60 to 70% of the time. You'll be able to figure it out. But here are special words and vocabulary that are not slang, but you won't have to look them up. You won't have to look them up. You won't have to look them up because I've given you a vocab list for his video. Yeah. And you're also going to have new subjunctive ideas to practice and things kind of subjunctive and maybe not talking about the video to talk about next week. Bien?
Yeah.
You're also going to get 2 very shorty videos. One talks about why all those stem changers come into the picture in subjunctive, and one that will talk to you about which subjunctive forms are truly considered irregular. And it's a short list. Short. Easy to listen to. Okay?
Okay.
So next week is going to be another subjunctive week, but with the same triggers. You may hear some different ones in the Luisito video, just know, but be listening for those odd subjunctive forms. Just kind of make a hash mark. I think you're going to have about 3 or 4 instances that you hear during the video. Bien?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfecto, perfecto, perfecto. Bien. And maybe next week we'll do an actual reading thing, which will be a little bit slower.